Yeah.
I'm just curious because sometimes I feel a little bit uncomfortable with when people talk about like an authentic practice or like authentic yoga. Because a lot of times like it seems like people are saying that, oh well, you know, there's a lot of people who aren't authentic, and by implication it's like we're the ones who are authentic because we're aware that there are other people who are inauthentic. So I was just wondering what your thoughts are on that. Like, what is an authentic practice for you?
Authentic itself is, you know, from the Buddhist perspective, right, everything is empty of any self-nature. So authenticity is kind of a non-issue. Like, you know, what's the authentic Italian? I mean, there's no such thing. So what I think in terms of the yoga question, what I think I hear you saying is that there's a fullness to the yoga traditions, like how that's going to look in someone's practice and everything else is going to be very different. It's going to be shaped by very many different streams of causes and conditions. In the memorial I wrote about Georg Feuerstein for Yoga Journal, I quoted him as a couple of years ago saying that, you know, if you think about yoga tradition, and when he would talk about the yoga tradition, he used capital for that. It was like, it's like all these streams, and some of them even have contradictory ideas of what liberation is and everything else, but what they do share is this understanding that it's a soteriological practice, right? And that meaning that it's about liberation and not simply a physical exercise. So, you know, sidestepping the question of authenticity. And the reason for this, which is related to what you're asking, is, and I understand, so let me really try and be as fully and clearly as I can about this. Many people, when they hear me talk, they go, well, I don't care why anybody comes to a yoga class. They could come so they can look good naked, or, you know, whatever. But as long as they get in there, because then when they practice, they'll be led to the deeper practices of meditation and everything else. And my response to that is, A, that's imputing some kind of essential nature to the asanas that I don't see. I know plenty of people who've been practicing asanas for decades as a really good workout. When people come to a yoga studio, and I don't care why anybody comes to my studio, you know, if they want to look good naked, that's great. But as a teacher, I want to make sure that they're at least aware of the fullness of the thing. You know, Georg Feuerstein used to always say, be clear, do you want to be a yoga teacher or an asana teacher? And if you want to be an asana teacher, that's great. I mean, that's, you know, you've got integrity there. But if you say that you're a yoga teacher and you're just teaching the asanas, then he would question that, and I agree with him, you know. So I think it's our duty as yoga teachers to present the fullness. You can't force anybody, you know, and so they may still keep coming just to look good naked. I don't care. You know, that's not my karma. But as a teacher, I want to present the fullness of the tradition. And then those people, and I know there are many people who go just to look good naked, and over years, all of a sudden they're like meditating and they're doing all this stuff. Again, that's less about the asanas than about who they are, what karma they bring to the practice already. I don't think there's anything magical in the postures. Remember, the 14th century, the Garuda Samhita was saying, without meditation, the postures can be an obstacle to liberation.
We'll take one more question, I think, and then... Yeah, or do you guys want to keep going? Yeah? I thought your hand up. Yeah.
Just to amplify what you're saying, there's a lack of teaching of Patanjali for sure. And when people want to have a more spiritual practice, they go to Buddhism. And so, like you're saying, the tenets of yoga are not really taught unless you work really hard to find those teachers. So, you know, I know this from my experience, I also know from people around me, they want it, and they can't find it. So, what do we do? You know, so we come to Buddhists for the understanding, which isn't wrong, because they're not completely unrelated.
Right.
But then, what do we do about that part of the yoga? You know, reading it on your own, it's okay, but it's pretty deep text.
Yeah, yeah. The movement towards more and more and deeper yoga teacher trainings. You know, for instance, I know the Moksha Yoga teacher training has, you know, I mean now in the States and many places it's like 200 hours and you can get certified. But the Moksha training, I think, you know, over this month it's at least 300 hours, and then they've got 10 months. It's like, and that was also Georg's. Like when I studied with Georg in the first and only yoga research education training, and it was 850 hours. And it was only for people who had already gotten yoga certification. It was not about asanas, it was about philosophy for 850 hours. So yeah, I think it's just, you know, if it's true in a capitalist system that the people, their demand will create it, then, you know, hopefully we should see more teachers coming, responding through the trainings and all.
Yeah, I think they're out there. It takes some work,
Yeah.
but they're there.
They're out
It takes
there.
a little digging.
There's not very many. There's not very many that you can really trust.
Maybe how are we doing? Are we good? Everybody seems pretty attentive and listening. So yeah.
I have to ask a question. I'm just curious. Does yoga have any connection to religious practice? Because I'm doing yoga, I just want to be in health and be fit. Like today, the teachers teach us about to feel your heart, feel the energy, and to be thankful for your heart. Like that's awesome. That's some idea that I love. Personally, I don't want to go too deep to the religious practice because I'm a Christian. I'm not very much into Buddhism. So how do you think about that? I don't want there's conflict between that.
I wrote an essay about this exact question because it comes up all the time. And so the first question is, how do you define religion? Right? Because the word religion, religio, means to tie back, to unite. That's what yoga means. So if that's the level you're taking at it, yoga is religious, but it's not a religion. Religion is an institutionalized structure. From my perspective, as an atheist, I'm still religious. Because I am in awe, and awe is the religious emotion about all of you and about life. I don't, personally deal with what most people think of as religious, right? But it's a religious experience or feeling. Carl Sagan, who was a great American scientist, would often talk about this. He was a naturalist. I mean, one of my blogs is called Zen Naturalism, and he would talk about how he understood the religious emotion, but he found it in science. Right? So yoga, I think, addresses religious concerns, but defined as this idea of integration and unity, and it has nothing necessarily to do with what we usually think of as religion. Within the yoga tradition, there are forms of yoga that are very religious in the sense of theism, like bhakti yoga usually has some kind of devotional element towards some god or goddess or something. But there are atheist yogis. So I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, And my Buddhist teacher would always talk about, like, if you practice mindfulness, you'll be a really wonderful Christian. Taking the sacrament at Mass is a mindfulness practice from this understanding. There was a question here in the corner.
Yeah. Well, you were referencing supply and demand in a capitalist system, and it just sort of the light bulb went off. Do you think that there's a conflict between capitalism and yoga?
Yeah, actually I do. That's why I kind of said it with that tone.
Okay.
Capitalism is based upon the proliferation, papancha, of desires. Right? You need this to be a better person. You need the new improved version. And so I do think that's why I also talk about it as countercultural. Seeing through those messages and all. Because as long as we think we need something external from ourselves to be whole, then we're just ensnared.
Yeah, and so then there's a difficulty, for example, as people who become interested in yoga and who want to teach yoga and share yoga and earn a livelihood in this current system, like, do you have any thoughts on that or any guidance around that?
It's one of the biggest conundrums around in a way. It's like, you know, I think it's possible to practice right livelihood. I mean, it's part of the 8 limbs of the Buddha, right? So, so the question becomes, in the marketing or merchandising of it, that's really going to require a lot of mindfulness in order to not, you know, try to fill your studio with anything that might be like, you know, the same thing that someone who wants to sell a car, you know. So I don't know, I mean, quite frankly, how someone sells that way. I mean, that's one reason why I actually have a 0 advertising budget. I don't advertise. You know, the Kripalu, when I teach there, has me in their catalog and stuff like that. But and outside of trainings, like I get paid when I teach at Moksha Yoga or Kripalu, but everything I do individually with students is on a dana basis.
Right. Because it seems like there's more of a framework for that in Buddhist practice. That there's a lot of retreats that are not all retreats, but many that are offered on that principle of donation and free will donation, and that it's less. I guess there's a lot of karma yoga possibilities, exchange possibilities in yoga studios. But
a lot of studios, I know that as part of the Moksha Yoga community, that there have to be a certain number of classes that are on a donation basis, and that money goes to local charities. Right. In New York, there's a Yoga for the People, which is completely on a dana basis and things like that. But, you know, yeah, if we want to make a living on it, we've got to walk this fine line, and the best way to walk it is to at least be alert to it. You know, I mean, I see a lot of, like, when this whole thing about, even before the Equinox video, Catherine Budig and her naked ads and everything else, Judith Lassiter, who was one of the founders of Yoga Journal, wrote a letter and said, you know, and this is what's really interesting, all she was criticizing was, in mainstream culture, right, scantily clad women are used to sell everything from cars to toothpaste, right? Can't we as yogis find a more creative way to sell products and not take over that form of advertising? And what was interesting is that, again, I don't think that's that subtle, but somehow, I guess, it was too nuanced for most of the people in the so-called yoga community, because she was trashed for that position. People were saying, you're a prude. You know, it's just I see a beautiful naked body and this, you know, beautiful posture and all that. And no one was really addressing the question that Judith was really raising, you know. And then that's where I came in with the body beautiful thing in response to all that. But yeah.
Do you think it's ethically questionable to try to sell yoga, period?
That's a good one.
I think there's like degrees of how that happens. There's I think that, like, I mean, one that's come up in the community a lot is like weight loss yoga, because it's sort of playing into this desire that we have for a certain kind of body, ties in nicely to the, you know, multi-billion-dollar weight loss industry, and it's, you know, like easily searchable and stuff, and so there's like ways that it's packaged, when it's packaged that way and it's like pretty obviously like a way to sell something, then even when the practice itself actually isn't about weight loss, you know, and I think that, yeah, I see there's degrees, because people do need to make a living or whatever, you need to, like, you know, build your brand or get out there and teach and stuff, and that's cool, and some people are content just doing it on a volunteer basis, but, you know, I think that yoga is more, like, when it comes to the, like, Buddhism and the ethical precepts, I think yoga is more susceptible to being commercialized and sold, because, I mean, with Buddhism, you just have your cushion, right? With yoga, there's, like, endless possibilities for cute yoga attire and clothes and mats and props, and, you know, it just goes out now, and then you get things like socks to practice in. You don't really need socks to wear, you know, whatever, but why not? Sure.
When I started, we didn't even have a yoga mat. Just put a towel on the floor.
Yoga chips.
You kids have it so easy.
Yeah. You know, it's like, it's just really, like, volatile to that kind of packaging.
Maybe if the advertising or marketing, rather than trying, like, I was very interested in the word used, like, selling yoga. How about, getting the info out in an educational way rather than a selling way, a merchandising way? Because, I think you do have to advertise. You have to get the word out, but maybe in a way that's more educational than the hook kind of thing that I see all the time, like the weight loss thing.
It's just not as sexy, but it's educational. Should we wrap it up?
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you for being such an attentive and engaged audience. I think are there any copies of the book left? Sold out, yes, awesome.
There's like one.
There's one left, okay. So there's one left. But you can also buy them online as well, which is actually the preferable. This is all I have in Montreal for print copies, but they're available online. If you go to 21centuryyoga.com, you can get them through the website there. We have a Facebook page as well, 21st Century Yoga Facebook page. And thank you so much for being here, Frank. It's
Thanks
awesome.
so much. It was great that
and we're going to be mingling around too. So if you have like more questions or discussion or whatever, just one. Is it a logistical question or?
Yeah, it's just I know that you're videotaping and wondering where.
Oh
to access that.
Good question.
Share it with
Are you
everybody.
going to put this on your blog?
Yeah, the video.
Her blog is cool. So cool if you don't know it. This is what's really amazing about the blogosphere, because that's how I met her.
Yeah.
It's
true.
I just was commenting on something, and one thing led to another.
You sent me an email because you weren't able to work the comment section.
Yeah, and and then just hanging out with her, I was inspired to start a blog of my own, and now I've got 3 really, but 2 that I publicize.
Yeah. So the video will be on my blog for sure. It's all yogababy.com. And then it'll probably be like in social media and probably on the 21centuryyoga.com website as well. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Karina, for hosting.